Hello, everyone. Thank you and welcome to another episode of the Best of Book Marketing podcast. I am Paulette. This is the incomparable Lainey Cameron, and we are here with two amazing guests today to talk about the issue of marketing books with controversial topics. We all love to write books, and sometimes we just want to talk about the things that are meaningful to us, and sometimes those includes for sensitive topics from like political commentary to social issues to medical. There's all kinds of things. We're going to dive into all of them today. And we're going to have a really great, frank conversation with authors who have written such books. And we'll just get some tips that hopefully will help you market your books a bit better. But we will begin with some personal updates really quickly. You want to take us first, Lainey?
Sure. So I'm in the middle of teaching my class, 12 weeks to book launch success. It's going really well. We're getting into social proof and how to ask for author endorsements and how to gather reviews and all kinds of fun stuff. I am doing a fun thing in April. I am doing a reel a day challenge, as in a video reel, everyday challenge, every day for the month of April. And I do not like doing reels. It takes me totally out of my comfort zone. If you want to have a giggle, go see today's one where I'm actually dancing on camera. That is as far out of my comfort zone as I can get.
It's like, you go, girl.
I am doing it for all of you, because when I do something that I don't know if it's going to work, it's because I want to see what I can learn and what I can share. And so I am making myself dance on camera for the purpose of learning what it looks like to do a reel a day and see what actually works over the month. So it's going to be a fun one, totally out of my comfort zone. And I'm continuing slow progress on my second book. It's moving forwards. I'm almost back to regular life. My mom is out of hospital. She's doing better. So things are going much better.
Yay, Mom.
I'm going to have to cancel some travel plans, but yay, Mom, she's doing so much better. So life is good. There's hummingbirds outside. It's a beautiful day in Mexico. What about you, Paulette?
Today I found out that I won a book award that I didn't know about 2 months ago. So I won the Indies today. I was a runner-up in Best Contemporary Romance. So that was kind of cool for my new book, What We Give Away, shameless plug. And that was super cool. And I decided to go back and do a second edition of my first book, Love Only Better. We know so little when we first start writing books, and just like anything, you get better as you go. And I just kind of want to go back and rewrite that one and bring it up to the standards of my current work for one particular reason: marketing. Because when we market our books, we often market to book ones in series. And I didn't want my book one to be the quote, weakest title in the bunch. So I'm just trying to bring them up to the same standard so I can have hopefully more marketing success and read through. So we'll let you know how that all goes when it's done. But I guess those are the big two things. And we can intro our guest. Hello, Gabby. Thank you for joining. Gabby said she loved the dancing.
Okay, yeah, I embarrassed myself in public by dancing on camera, but whatever. Okay, let me bring our two guests on stage and tell you a little bit about them. Get back from the camera, Paulette. You and I are in the camera, like back.
Whoa!
Yes. There we go. So we have two fabulous guests, both people that I adore and Paulette adores, and we invited them because both of them have written books that touch on really difficult and controversial topics. And we invited them not necessarily because they know everything there is to know about marketing. I wish any of us did, but because they have expertise in what it feels like to bring out a book that is controversial, that is not an easy topic, just like you do, Paulette, just like I do. And so let me tell you a little bit more about both of them. Laura Drake is an author of both women's fiction and romance. Wave giveaway for us, Laura. Hi. Women's fiction and romance. Her debut did something stellar, which is that it won the Rita Award for the best first book from Romance Writers of America, which is insane, a debut novel. And since then, she's gone on to publish 10 more romances for women's fiction. I know, because I know Laura really well, that her heart is in the women's fiction, but the money is in the romance. Is that a fair categorization?
Sure.
No, her heart is in both. Sorry, didn't say that, romance readers. And Laura is a city girl who never grew out of her tomboy ways. She's outside of the DFW area and also just such a friend to writers. She teaches wonderful classes with Margie Lawson's Writing Academy. In fact, she's been teaching one. You're teaching right now, Laura. It's coming right up.
And coming up soon, yes.
Coming up soon. So she teaches, she does conferences where she teaches. Get on her list if you're not on her email list. Lots of great stuff. Sharon is really interesting in that Sharon has written across genres with her first 2 books. Her first book was, oh, there you go, Paulette's holding them up. Her first book, No Rules, was a memoir, and her second book, The Shutdown List, is a thriller, both of which are award winners, which is most impressive to cross genres and do so well with your books. So congratulations. And Sharon is, she worked in information technology as a consultant and programmer, and she's also part of the Thursday night writer support group that I host every Thursday. And I've learned so much from her over time. She helps me out a lot. So I'm really excited to have you here, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here today.
Okay, so let's get moving forwards. So I'm asking you the first question here, and let's start with Sharon. Tell us a little bit about what sensitive or controversial topics have been included in your books, and did you consider the implication of that as you were writing them when you started, or was it when you get to the end of the process that you're like, oh, this is a little bit of a tricky topic that I took on here?
Okay, so I'll start with the memoir because that's something I wrote over many, many years. It takes place in the early 1970s, and it's about when I was 16 years old. I ran away from home to join the hippies in California. Follows the next 4 years of my life and how that period of time changed me and how I ultimately awakened to feminism and found my own strength. So, of course, as soon as people hear hippies, they have a lot of preconceived notions, and a lot of those preconceived notions are true. So there's a fair amount of sex, there's a fair amount of drugs, there's hitchhiking, there's all kinds of things that went on at that time. And, you know, some still going on, but some not so much because things have changed about how the world is. So when I was writing it, I was a little bit feeling, I really just wanted to capture the times and I wanted to capture what was really happening. And I was a little uncomfortable, but I went to a lot of workshops and I went to a lot of different classes and writing events and things of that nature that about memoir that really helped me put it in perspective. And one of the things that I heard repeated over and over was, don't worry about what people think, just write it, because you can always take it out later if you decide that you don't want it in there. But, you know, write what you want to write the way you want to write it. And even my husband said he would not read it until I was completely done because he didn't want to influence what I wrote. So so I wrote everything, and then at the end I ended up not really taking anything out other than kind of preening it a little bit to because it was too long. So I had to cut some because it was too long. I had to keep it more focused on my theme about awakening to feminism. And other than that, I put it all in there. Not all of it. I mean, there was some stuff that just wasn't necessary or I just didn't feel comfortable sharing. But enough of it, enough of all kinds of things. So I didn't really try to modify it to make anybody happy.
And then your second book is interesting because it hits right on environmental issues. It's a thriller, but it's got an environmental bent to it, right?
Yes. So the second book, I wanted to write something that I felt had meaning that was important to me. And it started out with me talking, taking a workshop where we were getting writing prompts from the instructor. And the writing prompt that she gave us was a photo of somebody holding a flag where they could have been arrested in Russia. And as a result of this, we were asked to write something where something that we felt we would be willing to sacrifice our freedom for. And it could be fiction or it could be true. And what came out at that time was this sense, this feeling of protesting on the steps of the Capitol in Washington about the environment, because the environment was being forced out of our discussions, and that bothered me. So that's what I began to write about, and it grew from there.
Awesome. Let's move to you, Laura. Tell us a little bit about, I mean, I know of some of your books and some of them touched me so deeply, but tell us about some of the controversial topics you've written about.
Well, the most recent one was For Roger, women's fiction. It deals mostly with the right to die and that controversial issue. But I didn't set out to write it because it was controversial. I'm one of those people that I don't know what I really think until I write it. Writing is so cathartic for me. It helps me resolve things that I don't even know are messed up inside. Well, a lot of it I know, but a lot of it people tell me. But this particular one, my husband has Parkinson's, and he's done really well. He's 16 years diagnosis, but you cannot help but think about the future. And so this book grew from that. I'm very interested in the subject. Some states have made it legal to a certain extent. There's all kinds of law challenges about it all. I live in Texas. It is still considered manslaughter in Texas to help assist someone to die. So that's where it all came from. And I just get an idea and a character and I go with it. I have no idea where the story's going. And this one took me places I was surprised. I did not realize I'd end up there, but luckily it has a hopeful ending. But I do understand that it's not for everyone. A lot of people have very firm thoughts on the subject and opinions. And I tried not to let my opinion show through in the writing. I wanted to show both sides fairly. So at the end, no matter which side of the controversy you're on, you at least understand the other side better. That was the goal.
And
And
Paulette,
I think you did a really good job of that, because I think, especially in the book, The Road to Me, which also kind of dealt a little bit with like the right to die idea with the character of the woman and her grandmother. I didn't feel like I was being preached to, and
Good.
I couldn't tell like what your thoughts was. And interesting with Sharon's book is with the shutdown list, like I know you, I know where your politics are, but I didn't feel like I was being lectured to or I was being forced to take a side. I just was like experiencing the book with the characters. The perspective was clear, but it didn't feel like intrusive or preachy. So I think you've both done a really good job of, balancing that in your work.
and Paulette, your books are like part of your brand is taking on social issues, right? So tell us about some of the social issues that come up across your series.
Yeah, so I've done women's intimacy in the first one. I did Me Too, but with a male perspective that wasn't, we'll talk about this later, wasn't, people who read it really liked it, but it wasn't like a typical social take on Me Too, to take the male side of that. So that wasn't particularly, popular. And then my third book takes on race and belonging, and my fourth takes on weight and body size. So yeah, my brand is a little bit around controversy, you can say, for sure.
And actually, let's start with you on this next question, Paulette. So did that make it harder or easier to market the books? Were there hurdles that you didn't see coming as you took that approach?
I think the controversy, the social issues, it's really about, for me, writing about things that interest me, like Laura was saying, but also framing in a way that would kind of match genre expectations for readers. So it's in there, and it just kind of depends how much you lead with it in terms of how well it fits or doesn't fit the genre. So interracial romance is a big genre. So having an interracial couple and taking on race, I think, is really welcome for people who read interracial romance. In terms of weight and body size, like that's an issue that a lot of people can relate to. So in my new book, What We Give Away, I think that's kind of welcome. I think in the first book, it was a little tricky because we're talking about women's intimacy, but a lot of people are uncomfortable talking about women's intimacy. So that can be a challenge. So I think it might vary from issue to issue, I guess is the answer for me, Lainey. Yeah, I guess so.
Do you find that because you consistently write about social issues that someone will go read one of your other books, even if it wasn't a topic they would have started, like naturally chose?
Yes, I definitely am finding people that are reading one book and then exploring the others. And I think that because they're presented in a really entertaining, not preachy way, people are open to the journey.
Right. So Laura, what was your experience? You've picked like A Right to Die, for example, with for Roger. Did it make it harder to market that book?
I marketed it the same as I always do. I have a large following on social media, and I was one of the founders of Readers Coffee House, which is 18,000 readers. And so I had a big audience, but because a lot of people, number one, aren't comfortable with the subject. Number two, a lot of people right now, with the state of the world, first of all, don't want heavy subjects. They're looking for lighter reading. Also, many people are facing the aging parents and dying parents, and they do not want to go there. So I understood that when I wrote it. But I don't think I don't have a problem. I love tough subjects. I love delving into it. And I knew there might be a problem, but it was bigger than I thought it was going to be.
Interesting.
That's interesting.
And what about for you, Sharon? Has it been harder because you've got these environmental issues or drugs in your memoir? Or do you think it has in some ways been part of what makes the book interesting to people?
Well, okay. So for the first book, the hippie kind of era book, what I've noticed lately, and perhaps it's because it's also around feminism and sort of the second wave feminism happening during that time, the interest seems to be picking up. So even though the book at this point is a few years old, when I go to in-person events and stuff, more and more people are interested in the memoir because they're interested in that era. They're interested in what it was like for women to experience that awakening to feminism, and they're interested in what the environment was like while that was happening. So that's kind of a plus. The whole drug thing, I kind of just assume people assume that's going to be in there because, it's hippies. And would you think there wouldn't be drugs? I mean, I don't think so. So that's that one. With the other book, with the thriller, I tend to pitch it not so much pushing the idea of the environmental issue. I pitch it more as a thriller, but I make sure that it's clear that there's an environmental issue. Because when I pitch it, I say, Anita, it's a book about Anita, whose husband has disappeared after leading climate activists in a protest. So that puts that out there, that there's climate activism and there's protests. So, but then I say, she learns she's also in danger. So she ditches all her electronic ties and goes on a perilous search for him, unaware he's kept a crucial secret from her. And that's when most people go, ooh. And that's when they want to read it. They aren't necessarily reading it for the environmental issue, but they know it's there. They're reading it because they want to know what this husband's secret is.
And I love that because I think what that does, and I've sold in person with Sharon, so I know how she relates to people one-on-one, but I think that when you frame the book in something that's relatable to lots of people, the book is interesting. It's not just about the issue, it's about the book. So talking about making the book interesting to people, folks, I'm very interested to hear, Laura, what is your stance on like trigger warnings and how much to reveal, like in the book blurb or in your retail marketing, how much is about the sensitivity to content or not?
I don't really worry about trigger warnings. It's not that I don't believe in them. I think if your book blurb is clear, people who are going to be triggered by that are going to see it. You can't hide something like that. I think that's not fair to readers. But I don't actually put on it trigger warning. You actually can tell from the back of the book blurb.
Yeah, and go ahead, Lainey.
So I shared with Paulette my upcoming book that is not out yet that I'm working on was inspired by some thoughts I had around gun control and how we don't really protect kids from guns. And, every week, you don't know this, but every week some child gets their hand on a gun and shoots and kills somebody. And we're talking little children here. We're not talking like teenagers who know what they're doing. We're talking little kids who shoot mom in the supermarket. And it was inspired by that concept, but it's the backstory of the book. And so I've actually had a bit of a challenge with, do I put it right on the back cover copy or not? Right? Like, because it is such a controversial topic and because it is such a divisive topic for people, this concept of gun control. And so I do think it's a really interesting point, Laura, that putting it right on the back cover brings in the people who want to read it and turns away the people who are just going to hate it anyway. And I think that probably is the right way to go.
I think interesting, Lainey, because I was going on vacation, I was browsing around the bookstore, and I read a lot digitally, y'all. So for me, going to a bookstore, like, that's a thing. So I got the book at the bookstore. I got it home, and I didn't say anything about the sensitive content on the back cover or but when I opened the front, the author's note was there, and it talked about that there was a school shooting in the book. And for me, I felt like, I'd already bought the book, and I ended up giving it to my daughter to return because it was just not a book. That was not a story that I wanted to consume at that time. So I think depending on how much is on page versus backstory can also kind of play a role. But Sharon, what are your thoughts on trigger warnings?
Well, I've never used them. One reason, when I was first writing the memoir, I wrote it over many years, and there was no such thing as trigger warnings when I was writing for the first number of years. That kind of came along much later. In fact, I only started hearing about them when my book was already coming out. And it seemed to be something that was more common with self-published books, and not so much with traditionally published books. So, I kind of lean towards the idea that your blurb should say enough to make it clear that, like you shouldn't have a book that's about a happily married couple and there's like a horrendous rape scene in the middle, so there needs to be something in there that's going to alert people that there's more, things of that nature might be included. So, but if your blurb already makes it clear, I think you're fine.
Since we talked about book blurbs twice, y'all might want to go back and listen to our last episode where we had an amazing expert talking about book blurbs. And she too said that the tone and the language of your book blurb is something that should convey it. And she also wasn't a fan of book blurbs, but if you want to hear more about that, please go back and listen to episode 111.
Yeah, Jessie Kniff, book blurb magic. She was fabulous. And yeah, she didn't like trigger warnings. Her take was, no, I don't like content warning, trigger warnings. She was not a fan.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Laura.
And I was lucky enough to get to read an early version of Lainey's book. And, Lainey, it is backstory, but it's the substructure of your entire character. So it seems to me not only that you want to let people know about trigger warning, but it's actually what the story is about. I mean, I know it is backstory, but if you pulled out that piece of it, you wouldn't have a book.
Right. I mean, it was inspired by the question of, I read this stat about how many kids, every week some kid is killing someone, little children. And it was inspired by the question I asked myself of like, how do you grow up as that person? How do you live your life as that person? How do you move on? Even though you were a little kid, can you actually forgive yourself and tell yourself you were just a little kid, or do you have to live with the fact that you killed someone for your whole life? And so that was what inspired the book, and that's what my character's journey is, to work through that. So yeah, I think it is going to be on the back cover in the end. I think it actually is kind of core to what the book's about.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so next up, Paulette, did you answer this question about trigger warnings for yours? Did you have a take?
Oh, I didn't answer. That's funny because when I started my first book, I wasn't sure what to do. And I was looking at some other authors and what they did. And even books as, provocative as like It Ends With Us. Obviously, there's a big controversy with the movie, but the written book I found that extremely powerful and shocking when it happened. And I think the surprise was part of the experience. That book does not have a trigger warning, and it is about domestic violence. So I think that if I was someone who, was, surprised, I went into it thinking it was a romance, like that might be shocking. So I think part of the whole thing is not just what does the book blurb say, but what is the overall marketing presentation? How's the cover? What's the tone of the writing you use in your blurb? If it's funny and then you have something really serious in there, that's kind of a mismatch. So I think it's all about matching reader expectations. And I think, as we've discussed, if you do that with your packaging, with your cover, with your book blurb, with the tone, you probably can skip the book blurb. But I am a really big fan of author's notes, and I put that at the front of my books. I used to put it in the back, and I moved it to the front because I sell a lot digitally, and people can go and look at the book inside, and they can see the author's note is there. And so they can have that choice about whether to continue with the purchase or continue reading. So I feel like it's kind of like a compromise.
Laura, did you have a thought?
It's really interesting you say that, Paulette. One of my other books, The Road to Me, women's fiction, parts of it are really funny. I've got a goat in a convertible and an old lady at a nudist colony, and parts of it are very humorous, but there's one section that's brutally tough. Did I get away with it? I got great reviews. I haven't heard anyone complain. Now that one is not on the back. You would not know that. And I guess it could be a trigger to some people, but no one mentioned it yet.
Interesting. So let's move into a different topic. Let's talk about what has worked in general for you in marketing your books. Laura, you mentioned that you've got this phenomenal Facebook group and a big social media presence. Is that what's worked the best in terms of building connections with readers and marketing your work, or are there other things that have worked for you?
That has worked the best, along with, believe it or not, teaching. People get to know me through my teaching, and God bless Margie Lawson. She uses my examples from my books in almost everything she teaches. Thank you, Lord. And I know that I got a bunch of readers. I mean, I'll meet someone for the first time, they'll go, "You wrote the Bull Seaman book." It's like, you gotta be known for something. I mean,
so when I first met Laura, I'll share this as Lainey. I had studied Laura's work, including the Bull Seaman book, in Margie Lawson's class. I'd done some immersions, and you all know me as someone who's kind of out there, happy being on camera, even dances sometimes. I was frozen when I met Laura. I was in awe because it was the Laura Drake whose work I had studied. And I was like, oh my God, it's the Laura Drake.
I've never had anyone do that before or since. And believe me, Lainey, I love you for
it. So Sharon, what works for you? What's been effective for you in marketing your work?
Well, a few different things. I do a lot of in-person events. And so for me, that works a lot. I meet people, I talk to people, I see what interests them. They talk to other people and so forth and so on. So, I mean, that's one avenue. And then the other thing that's worked for me on occasion has been Facebook, but not necessarily so much posting about my book, but finding groups and threads that, particularly groups that have an interest of the type of thing that I write. So, for example, there's a group about one interesting thing that happened was I ran into a group that was talking about and making a documentary about the Watkins Glen Summer Jam in 1973. And the movie makers and the producers and so forth were talking about this movie and posing questions about what was it like, were you there, and that sort of thing. So I had been there and had written about it in my memoir, but then I ended up taking it out because the memoir was too long and I had to cut stuff. So it wasn't in the memoir, but I mentioned how I lived on a commune very near there. We all went to the concert, and I wrote a book about the era, but ended up having to cut it so it's not in the book, and what the book was. And because it wasn't the kind of Facebook page where they're worried about self-promotion, it got left there. And the producer bought the book and he read it. And he thought I did such a great job with capturing the times that he then interviewed me for this documentary film that they're making that's supposed to come out the end of this year or the beginning of next year, where they've interviewed like all these famous people in the music industry and all this kind of thing. So, I mean, he interviewed me for like an hour to talking about all of this stuff. Of course, the documentary is probably 2 hours, so I'll probably get like 5 minutes if I'm lucky, maybe 2. But but that kind of thing.
The movie business.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
But you're like, what you've done there, Sharon, is you've intersected a topic which is topical and interesting that's in your book, and you've worked out where people are talking about that thing, and then you turned up there. I also think what you've done with events is really interesting, because I want to talk about this a little more, because people may not realize what you mean by that. But you do like local fairs, right? Not necessarily just book events, right? Like holiday fairs, local fairs, and you've had quite some success with that. And so I think that's a venue authors don't think of. They think of book places to be, right? Like I should go be at the book fair or the library or the bookstore. But I find it very interesting that a lot of authors are having success, like you are, going out to local forums where you're the 1 or 2 books in the fair, not one of 100 books in the event.
Right, because the other thing that happens is that when people come by, a lot of times they're walking around looking at all this other stuff, and they're like, "Oh, books!" The ones that really have an interest in books, and so right away they're very curious about what you've written and what's available.
Yes,
Paulette,
truth be told, I have sold with Sharon showing the booth, and I don't do it anymore because she's so good at selling in person. I have no chance next to her. So I love you, girl, but I'm not sharing the booth with you no more.
So Paulette, before we move into our little sponsor segment, what do you do that works the best in marketing?
I think I just do a lot of different things, and I think definitely, like, I enjoy selling in person, and I've been integrating that in. I never do book fairs anymore. I only go where I can be like the one author or the 2 authors in a craft fair. So that's kind of my sweet spot. I also think of who my target audience is. I have usually college educated women and whatever. So I try to do events in specific communities where I feel like I'm going to find a readership that'll be receptive to my book. So I do a little bit of like demographic assessment before I pick the in-person things. I also do a little bit similar to Sharon, but online. So I look for podcasts that are kind of on the topic that I'm doing. So like when I had my first book, I was on a whole bunch of like sexy podcasts. And then on, the current book I'm on, I'm probably done 3 at least so far of like food and health and wellness podcasts. So I'm trying to do that intersection you're talking about in, those spaces, articles on blogs and things like that. And just doing a little bit of everything, I suppose.
That's great. So I think we're going to move into our, go ahead, Sharon.
Oh, I was just going to mention the other thing that I have started to do is to participate at conferences. So there's a couple of thriller conferences that allow authors who are going to be there to be on panels. And sometimes you're on a panel with some other very famous authors. So last year I did a panel at BoucherCon, which was in Nashville, which is for mystery writers from all over the country. And this year I'm doing a panel I got accepted as to do a panel at International Thriller Writers in New York City, which I'm very excited about in June. So that's going to be a great opportunity.
Yeah, I'll clap.
Okay, so I think we're moving into our sponsor segment. We haven't gone and gotten another sponsor yet. So I think, Paulette, you had suggested this week that we talk about my book for a change.
Yes, we do. Life gets lifey, y'all. Look for the merch. I'm planning to do merch.
If anyone wants to sponsor us, we haven't actually gone out and asked for a third sponsor. We've had 2 sponsors who we loved. We only pick sponsors who we believe in. We would never have someone sponsor the podcast that we don't trust. No scams, no garbage, nothing that we don't think works for authors. So we're very restrictive about who we will let sponsor the podcast. But if you might be interested, let us know, because we haven't even gone out and thought about having a third sponsor. Okay, I will talk about my book, which is called The Exit Strategy. Came out in 2020. During the pandemic. It has won 15 awards, and it is fun feminist fiction. And it actually fits with this topic of controversial topics and how do you write about controversial topics or market them, because this book has been called a feminist anthem. And the interesting thing is, when I started out, I knew that my personal story would be part of how I marketed the book, because I came from tech, I came from Silicon Valley. This book is based in Silicon Valley, and there's sexism that the characters experience throughout the book. The real story is about a wife and a mistress who meet across the negotiating table and realize at that second in time that they are the wife and the mistress. And the thing is, they can't walk away because one just invested in the other's company. So they are forced to work together. Well, a couple of things that I think are relevant to this discussion for this book. One is, so many people told me when I was out querying this book, so many agents said, I don't understand. It starts so well with the wife and the mistress, and there's all this tension, and they're angry at each other. I want it to be a revenge book about how they go after the husband. And I said, no, that's not the book I'm writing. I'm writing a book about how women are stronger than the situations we end up in sometimes, and we're collaborative, and we are better than the way we're portrayed in the movies and the TV shows where we're in cat fights and we can't get on with each other. Ultimately, this book is about how the women do succeed together and work through it. Spoiler alert, the husband doesn't die. He doesn't end up well, but he doesn't die. But like so many people told me, no, I will take this book and I want to represent it, but you have to kill the husband and they have to murder him. And I'm like, but that's not the book I'm writing. That makes the book about the guy. I want to write a book about the women. And so I stuck to my guns. And what's really interesting, this book has a lot of positive reviews. It's got 300 or 400 reviews on Amazon at this point. Most of the reviews, what people like in this book is the feminism in it, is the fact that it's about the women, is the fact that it's about the friendship. So I think the lesson there is, don't listen to people who tell you that you need to write something more mundane, that you need to write something that fits better in the box they want to put it in. Write the book of your heart, and the readers will find it and love it because it was the book of your heart. So I think that's the number one lesson I kind of learned from writing this book. And so that's what I would encourage other writers to do. And then it actually did help that it was relevant to my personal journey. I also had a lot of success with podcasts because I was able to talk about my own real life experience and how I experienced sexism in Silicon Valley and how that made its way into the book and how it influenced this book. But one of the things I tell my class, when you're trying to get on podcasts, you're generally not pitching the book when you reach out to a podcast. So I'll take an example of Paulette's latest book, right? Which is called What We Give Away. And Paulette's book is all about diet culture and how we've been lied to with diet culture. And she's been talking on some podcasts around body image and these things, but she doesn't pitch these podcasts by saying, I wrote a book, I want to talk about my novel, right? She pitches these podcasts by saying, this is a topic I'm very passionate about. Here are some of the things I can talk about. I assume, because I know Paulette does this well, and this is what I recommend to my class. And then the book becomes the proof point of all of those things. So for example, I pitched the podcast by saying, I am an ex-Silicon Valley executive. I have decided to leave Silicon Valley and I've decided to become an author. And here's why I made that decision. And here's some of the things other people can learn from that life change. And then the book becomes the proof point of what I'm saying. So for example, I talk about in interviews the idea of imposter syndrome. And I was told that it wasn't credible that I had a CEO in the book with imposter syndrome. Well, in my experience, a lot of female execs have imposter syndrome, but the book and the character Carly in the book becomes the proof point of what I'm saying. But I never approach podcasts with, here's my book, I want to talk about my book. Your book is not news. I'm sorry, people, the book is not news. You have a topic that is newsworthy, and your book is the example of that topic. And I think it's very important to turn it around that way, because unless you're trying to get on like a book podcast, you want to get on lifestyle podcasts, mom podcasts, body weight podcasts, body image, sexism, women's podcasts, right? Those are the ones you want to be on. They've got the big audience, and they don't want to talk about a book. They want to talk about you and your story and how you came to this conclusion. And those are the things that are really interesting. So just using my own book, The Exit Strategy, which I encourage you to go read. It's very well reviewed, 15 awards, a lot of fun, to say that there's some lessons there that we can learn on how to write around controversial topics. Moving on, that was our sponsored segment for this week.
And I recommend it.
Absolutely.
It's amazing, amazing, amazing book. I can't hold it up because I read digitally, but it's there.
Okay, so I'm going to skip a couple of questions here because I feel like we've covered the next couple of questions, and maybe I'm just going to skip right into a question that we were going to have Paulette ask here, which is, what has been the biggest surprise when engaging with readers around your work? So you've taken these books out that have these somewhat controversial topics. Has there been anything that surprised you in terms of reader reactions? And why don't we start with Laura here?
Honestly, this was the good side of it, is that the people that have read it loved it. I mean, it is a hard subject, but they said in very eloquent language, it was amazing, that it was a book that would stick with them for a long time. It made them think and consider the other side. There's legal in it, there's medical in it. And yet at the heart, it's a women's fiction. It's a woman learning. And yeah, I mean, luckily the reviews have been the biggest surprise, and love it. You know, you all are authors, you know, wow.
Lainey, we can't hear you, love. Are you on mute?
Apparently so. I don't remember putting myself on mute, but I am. So I was going to say, For Roger is a fabulous book. And to your point on like the legal ramifications, so I've lived in California for the longest time, which has a more lenient perspective on this. And so I had never even stopped to think about the fact that in Texas, it's still illegal and you can go to jail for helping someone. I just never even thought about it. And so that book made me think, gosh, what would I do in that scenario if my loved one was asking me to help, and yet it was actually against the law in the state I lived in? And I just never stopped to think about it. So I love that you made me stop and think, but also like educated me that, you know, my experience and the laws in the state I'm used to that is not universal. It's very different in other states.
Yes. Yep.
Sharon, what about you? This question of surprise. What has been the biggest surprise as readers have given you feedback?
Well, one of the surprises to me for the memoir was that I expected the audience would be mostly boomer women who had experienced that and were interested in sort of, you know, reliving that era. But that didn't turn out to be the case. Very often it is younger women, you know, sometimes very young women, even teenagers, and women in their 20s and 30s who are the most interested, because it's something that's so foreign to them and they haven't heard a lot about it and they don't really know much about those times. So they're very curious about that. So that's been a surprise. And then as far as the shutdown list, you know, I've had great feedback. I've had, because I go to a number of events where I might go to the same one, you know, 4 or 5 months later, and some of the readers will come in who have already read the book, and I'll have readers. Frequently, I either have readers who are thriller. Some readers will buy both, but some readers, you know, say, "Oh, I really I really like thrillers, or I really like memoir, and that's what they'll buy. But when they come back, they love the book so much that they decide to give my other book a chance, even though it's out of their genre.
Sharon, isn't it humbling when your past is now looked at as historical?
Yeah, it is. And that was one of the awards I won, actually, was historical memoir from Next Generation Indie Book Awards. It was historical memoir. Okay.
Paulette, what
That's a
about
cool
you?
category.
What's been surprising to you as you've written across these different topics in terms of interactions with readers?
I think I'm sometimes surprised if I'll give them a chance. Because like you write these things and you want people to read them, and you're like, oh, you actually are reading these things. I love the reactions when people are feeling really validated and seen. I try to write about these different life experiences that people go through, and oftentimes people feel really isolated and alone, like they're the only ones who are having those struggles, who are having those feelings, who are having those challenges. So it's really validating when, you know, readers say, that's me, I can so relate to that. I've, you know, for all the books, I've had really tremendous feedback. Especially on, Laura gave me great feedback on the latest book. She's like, that was my mother, so people,
Yep.
See themselves reflected on the page. And I think that's what we want. We want to write relatable characters that people can connect with, because you want to, journey with these characters. You grow to love them and care about them. And it's even that much richer an experience when you feel like you can see yourself reflected on the page. And I think, especially because I write ethnically diverse characters, that's like another layer that people from different communities can feel like seeing on the page. My question. I've been like part of the interview this week, so I've been a little slouchy here. But yeah, so I love this question because we were having a little bit of an email exchange today, and sometimes we want to write these books, but not everyone wants to read them. So, it impacts the audience that we can have for these books. So we'll start with you, Laura. Do you have any advice about level setting expectations for sales and response? If you choose to write a book that, has a bit of a controversial theme involved.
In this case, for Roger and one of my other books, Days Made of Glass, I wrote for others, but mostly for me. For Roger, as I said, is me working out end of life and how you deal with that. Days Made of Glass, none of it was biographical, but the two sisters in the book had the relationship my sister and I did, and I lost her to cancer at 32. And I never knew, and I wrote this book 20 years after she passed, and I never knew I hadn't completely let go of her until I wrote that book and finished it. And then I realized, wow. So although, yes, would I love to sell like Jodi Picoult? Oh, yeah. But I got what I wanted out of those books because those two specifically weren't about sales. They were about me and my heart. And so I will never be disappointed in either one of those books. So just if you're going to write something close to the heart, like a memoir, Sharon, or Paulette, like what you wrote about in your most recent book, Body Shaming and us dealing with our bodies, just write what you want to write, say what you want to say, and then put it down. Don't worry about, I know we all chase reviews and sales and all, but that's not what that book's about. So try not to go down that rabbit hole.
Cool, Sharon, you've had very different experiences with each of your books, obviously with different genres, but controversial in their own ways. So did you especially maybe with the memoir, when you're working with a publisher, was there any conversation around how they were viewing the projected sales for the book, given some of the themes you covered in the memoir?
Well, because my memoir is published by a hybrid publisher, projected sales aren't really a concern to them. So it wasn't, and there for She Writes Press, their imprint is literary fiction and memoir. So just the idea of it being a memoir, makes it something that fits with their what they like to publish. So yeah, there wasn't any issues at all with that, and in fact, I had worked with the publisher beforehand, and as an instructor when I was doing editing. She worked kind of as my developmental editor, and she kept encouraging me to, put it all out there and, completely, just don't be afraid, just speak your voice and all that kind of thing, because that was important to her. So.
Yeah, I've definitely had some thinking around this, because I think there's a lot of things that triangulate that impact sales. It's not only the sensitive things, I also genre bend. So there's probably a few things that are, sometimes impact, where or how many book sales or how ads function and so forth. But definitely for my second book, What We Never Say, it had a male, it had a female lead character. And I'm always so surprised that people don't really talk about the female storyline in that book, because they focus, it's kind of revolving around the male character storyline a little bit in that book, which was a male survivor of female sexual harassment, female on male sexual harassment. So I, for me, that book, I love that book. It has the favorite ending I ever written. If you don't like as much spice, it's got very little spice in that one. I was trying to appeal to women's fiction readers, but the topic of this male Me Too situation, I think, just didn't land as well as I had hoped it would. So that probably, makes me sad, because I love the book. It has some really great reviews, but that topic just sometimes isn't as appealing to the reader. So when you write these things, for me at least, I always have like tempered expectations for book sales, because you never know how some of these issues are going to land.
That's a good point. So we're heading into the home straight here in our last couple of questions. And this is a big, difficult one, but we did give you an advance warning. We're going to ask this question. So knowing what you know now about writing a book that touches on a difficult topic or a controversial topic, would you do it again? And what advice would you give to authors who maybe have a book of their heart that touches on a very controversial topic that they're working on or thinking about working on? What would you say to them, having taken this on and kind of looking back in time? And Paulette, I'll let you go first on this difficult question.
Oh, okay. I think, like most of my books, yes, 100%. I would definitely do them again. I think with my second one, the one I just talked about, I might have like framed it a little bit, because, I do write books that I want, but I also want books that will sell. And you do need to be mindful of the marketplace if that's your approach. Like if you're like Laura was saying, you're writing it for yourself and you kind of don't care about book sales. Often I say I don't care, but I like really do. So that's a thing where, you need to look at what the marketplace, and, if I had done a little market research on the topic, I might have, written the book in a little bit of a different way. That would have, landed better with the audience I was aiming for. I wrote, like Laura said, Book of My Heart, and it's amazing, and it's won 6 awards, so it's quality, but I might have tried to pivot it a little bit to make it a little bit more appealing.
Sharon, what about for you? Would you do it the same way again? And what advice would you give to other authors?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I've noticed when I speak to people in, what I see when I encounter people at book fairs and so forth is, I think they find my books interesting because they're kind of unique and different from every other book that is out there. Not that, I mean, they're not totally different. They have some similarities, but but they kind of stand out a little bit. And so that makes people more interested. And, and I see that same thing in Paulette's books too, because they're a group of unique topics that everyone isn't writing about, and that can be a big advantage to an author. A lot of it is just getting the word out there to people so that they know these books exist, and that's where the book marketing comes in. But yeah, absolutely. And I am writing another book right now, and it's going to be interesting to see where this one actually ends up. But it's different than other things I've written, but it's still a thriller.
And Laura, what about you?
Thank God I'm not writing for the money. I always say, lightning can strike, but that's not a good marketing strategy. And it's not really good for your 401k either. So I am very lucky in that I don't have to worry about the money. That said, to me, the money's just a way of keeping score. I want more readers with every book. Right, left brain, and they fight, right? I mean, I write the book that I am interested in. I'm not following trends. I want to learn things. I want to learn what I feel about things. That's number one, because if I'm not having fun, I'm retired. There are a lot more things. There's a bunch of fish out there that I'm still chasing to try and catch. So I've got to be enjoying myself. So it's got to be something that engages me. Now, would I love if one just lightning did strike and it really hit? Oh my God, yes. But I'm grateful that I don't have to rely on that.
And for anyone listening and watching who thinks Laura is using a metaphor when she talks about catching fish, no, she is not. She is talking about standing in the middle of a river with the full galoshes and everything on. Yeah. I love Laura's fishing photos. Okay, so the most important question of the whole time, people have been listening, they're learning more about your work. Where can they go learn more about you and your books? And what is the best way to engage with you? And Laura, why don't you kick us off here?
My website is lauradrakebooks.com. There's all kinds of information about me and my books and everything I've written. But the place that I play and the place that I hang out is my Facebook group, Laura Drake's Peace, Love, and Books. And the only rules are no politics, no meanness, and no spiders. And I post snark every day and beauty pics. And it's become, not because of me, it's because of the members. It's a community now. We've got running jokes and it's just crazy. We have a great time.
It's a lot of fun. Sometimes it's the highlight of my day seeing what meme got posted on that group. Like,
mine too. I just enjoy the heck out of it.
Sharon, what about you?
Okay, well, I also have a website, SharonDukett.com, one word. Sometimes people struggle with Dukett. There's no C in it. That's the biggest mistake I see. And there's no E at the end. So SharonDukett.com. I'm also on Facebook. I have a personal account as Sharon Dukett, and then Sharon Dukett Author is my author account. So I have more of author types of things on that account. And I'm also on Instagram as Sharon.Dukett. I have a newsletter, so if you come to my website, you can sign up for my newsletter. I don't hound you. It comes out about once a month. So that's awesome.
It. And we will put all of that on the episode page. If you go to bestofbookmarketing.com, you can get all the links to everyone's social media and websites. And Paulette, why don't you answer the question too? And I'm going to answer it too for once.
Yeah, we never know. Yes, PauletteStout.com. I'm on everywhere, social media at Paulette.author. TikTok, I'm hanging out there, and Instagram mostly these days. And come over to my website. You can find my books everywhere. I'm in Kindle Unlimited. I have print, ebook, and audio. And I guess that's it. Lainey?
I'm on LaineyCameron.com. You can find the links to all my other social medias there. And Instagram is where you are most likely to see me. And I'm having fun, like I said, this month, doing a reel a day. So come see what we can learn together as I take that one on.
And just really quickly, I just want to give you a little bit of a preview of what some of the episodes coming up. We'll be doing a recap of our season of episodes so far. That'll look for that. And then we are doing the long-awaited episode on Facebook ads. So if you are interested in Facebook ads, be sure to look for that episode when it comes out.
And I have to credit that Laura was actually the first person to ask us to do an episode about Facebook ads. So we've been answering for a year. Yes, we will get to it. So just to say that if anyone is watching or listening and there's a topic that you would like us to cover, we cover the topics you ask for. We go find the best experts and bring them in. So if there's a topic that's top of mind for you, let us know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. And we will see you next episode.
Thank you.
Thanks.